Hi guys. Today is going to be, well, God, this weather is depressing me, quite frankly. So we're going to take some time on this kind of gross day to just do a quick review of some of the stuff that you worked on this week. Um, I'll probably also post a Google survey, just checking in about how this week went. Obviously, moving forward, there's going to be some changes, but those changes aren't going to come until not the next coming week. What's a week, honestly? What are days anymore? It's all up there. Um, but changes are obviously afoot, but we won't be worrying about those today. We're going to be worrying, in fact, instead about the American Revolution. So I had some text messages about some concerns that you guys had about the American Revolution, like a web quest thing where you use that map and answer some questions. So I'm going to go through some of those. And then I'm going to review one more time the assignment that I kind of ran through yesterday with those sources. Yeah, that's kind of what today's focus is going to be. And then there'll be a little short Google survey about that. All right. So let's jump into this assignment, right? So yesterday I posted this. I'm going to take a look at it. And there were questions, obviously, that were embedded in the It's Learning land. Thank you for those of you who submitted it. And so this link, right, that's what you have to answer some questions about that. So here's the map, actually, right? And then you guys had to, I'm just going to X out of there because I don't need that right now. You need to answer some questions. So the first phase of the battle, right, early years, 1775 to 1778. And then there's the second phase. Quite frankly, this is just kind of like a quick way to sort of familiarize yourself with where some of these battles were taking place. I think the causes of the American Revolution, right, whether or not they were primarily political or were they economic, is probably a more interesting question rather than the battles themselves. But it's incumbent upon us to kind of just explore this briefly. So let's just take a look here, and then there's going to bring you to this map, right? You click anywhere to begin. And then there's like some information. So you find the city of Boston and click on it, and then you're like, is that Boston? That's Bunker Hill, which is kind of technically in Boston, but whatever. Click on Boston, and then there's some information, right? And then you read some things about it. And the first question is asking you why had the British closed the city? Why did they close Boston? And in large part, that has to do with this right here. After several violent incidents, the British government announced in 1774 that they were going to punish Boston, the citizens there, for their unruly behavior. And that has a lot to do with, yes, the destruction of private property in the Boston Tea Party, right, which is a fun way of saying people boarded a ship dressed as Mohawk Indians and dumped hundreds of pounds of tea overboard, worth thousands of pounds of dollars, to protest the fact that the colonists had to only buy tea from this particular company in order for it to make a profit. And people in Boston are particularly aggrieved by this. And so the English station soldiers there to kind of keep things at bay, right? So the Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams, all of this kind of violent, and it is violent. I'm going to make this very, very clear. I'm not going to show you the clip about a poor tax collector from the John Adams miniseries who is essentially like physically and emotionally assaulted by an angry mob. But these are not just, we're going to write these like pamphlets about why we hate the British. Like, people are using physical force. So soldiers are stationed there. Boston is the center of all this activity. The British say, we want to control all this activity. We want to limit it. So they close the city, right? They close the city. Okay, so that's number one, right? So why did Thomas Gage, right, who is the general there, who's in charge of all the British forces in Massachusetts, gets word that colonists, Americans, are storing guns, ammunition in Lexington and Concord, which now I think about Lexington and Concord, and it seems hard to believe that that would be the case, but here we are. And so they send over 900 British soldiers, right, to try and deal with the fact that there's the stockpiling of ammunition essentially against the British government. So that is why, right, they get word, they send the soldiers out there. So read about Lexington and Concord. So then what you would do is you would then say next lesson. You would click there, and then it says next. Find Lexington and Concord just to the west. First of all, this looks like it. This might as well be New Hampshire. Look, I like this map, and this is not where that is. Crazy. Also, in all these videos, a lot of times Concord is pronounced Concord, which I think is funny. Who won the battle? And even if you get it wrong, it doesn't make a difference. But it's the Americans! Yay! It's pretty violent. Men are killed. And from an American perspective, this is like when, this is a great patriotic moment, right? Americans are challenging tyranny and despotism. But, if you're boots on the ground, if you're an English soldier or a British soldier, and you're probably very young, this is like a horrific nightmare. So this is an American victory, and it also is very concerning to the British government. And this is so war basically unofficially begins here. So war doesn't actually truly begin until July 4th, 1776, right? I mean, there's violence, there's conflict going on, but an official declaration of war is not really going to exist until the American colonies declare themselves independent from Great Britain. But it's obvious from the events at Lexington and Concord that tensions are at an all-time high. I'm going to close Facebook right now. I don't really need that open. Okay. All right. And then you you would write down what happens to British soldiers. They die, right? And then you would go to, okay, we'll read about the Battle of Bunker Hill. And all you'd have to do there, right? And then you would say, next lesson. And then you find Bunker Hill. Well, okay, that's here. Who won the battle? It's the British, right? And you read a little bit about it. I doubt that you did, because all you had to tell me was who won. This is a very famous battle. General Warren, Joseph Warren, who is like a super important patriotic figure in Massachusetts. He's also like an actual physician. He's killed at the Battle of Bunker Hill, right? And there's this painting that used to be a link, but it's not anymore. It winds up being this like propaganda moment of this man being stripped of his clothes and bayoneted to death, and it's like this very moving event. But in any case, that's what you kind of did, right? You just click around, and then you would go next lesson, and then you would answer these questions. So read about the Battle of Quebec. Why was the invasion of Canada a failure, right? And then you would but you couldn't, you could probably just click on these things, and you're like, all right, let's find Montreal. I don't really need to know about Montreal. But you just kind of click through, right? And then you're like, who won the battle? Oh, I got it wrong. Oh, no, it's right. And then, okay, well, then you go next lesson. And then you find Quebec, which is all the way up here. And the British won this one. Okay. And then it kind of explains why it's a failure. So you just got to click next lesson. And then you go to New York City, right, which is here. And then you're reading about, this is a hot mess. This is a disaster, right? So when they're deliberating whether or not they're going to declare independence, because by the way, the Continental Congress is still actually meeting. They're meeting. This is June 29th, 1776, right? British fleet, like a lot of ships arrive converging on New York City. This is terrifying to residents who are living in New York City, because like 7 or 6 days later, not even like 5 days later, independence is declared, right? So things are starting to happen. Things are starting to happen. So you go next lesson. So you kind of just clicked through these things and answered some short questions. That was really the goal. Did you look through, right? And there's a lot of steps, but at the same time, there were short questions. I will go through really quickly here and just talk a little bit more about French support being so important to the Americans. The United States the American colonies would not have won the war without support from the French, without financial support, without military support. The American colonists are completely outmatched, obviously, by Great Britain, by their navy, by their army. Despite the fact that they have the advantage of, home turf or whatever, the French are incredibly important. My hair is like so confusing because it's like going one way and then it goes the other. Oh, I can't even do it. Oh, it's so weird. So that's a big issue. They need the French. Okay. And then what you did for the other one, right, is you went back and you were like, all right, I'm going to submit the other one. I'm just going to play with my hair the entire time. It'd be very distracting to you. And then you were like, all right, I'm going to do the second battle path, right? And then you could just go down here, click anywhere to begin. Excuse me, and this is, you just clicked on some battles here. And you can just see where things are, right? This is South Carolina, that's North Carolina, that's Virginia, this is Delaware, Maryland, right, Pennsylvania. So then you just clicked around and you answered some questions. That was the big goal there. And then you submitted it. And again, if I received it, I gave you an R. If I didn't get it, I gave you a 0. But it didn't really impact your grade either way. Moving forward, that will change. But we're not there yet. So here we are. So yesterday's assignment was this, right? I asked you to analyze some sources. I included the sources. And then I also included a video of me kind of briefly explaining that. So there's a document packet. Then I provided you with a chart. So let's take a look at this chart right now. And some of what you guys did was, some of you only looked at the sources I talked through, and the idea was actually more to look at all of the sources to figure out, well, there's 10 total sources. Based upon those 10 sources, was the American Revolution more radical in nature, or was it more conservative? And the big idea there is that you would say, well, it's a little bit of both. In some ways, it really does represent this major departure from the way that things were done, right? Thomas Jefferson's preamble, the idea that all men are created equal, all men are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's, incredibly radical. However, in the same hand, right, in the same vein, you're looking at, inequality and inequity directed towards women, indigenous people, and men and women of color. So yes, it's radical. Yes, it represents the departure from the status quo, from the norm. But at the same time, a lot of those messages kind of fall flat because so many Americans don't have access to those kinds of rights, that kind of idea of equity. That's kind of the big idea. That's what you need to think about. Because moving forward, what we're going to be looking at is, well, now there's this new government. Now America, defeats Great Britain with obviously the French help, and they have to create a new government that's going to, in some ways, right, as best as it can, showcase or illustrate those things that inspired the revolution in the first place. You want to look for a government that's devoted to equity and fairness and equality, right? And beginning next week, we're going to explore to what extent that was created. After that, I think what we'll be working on is like a constitutional rights project. I'll be creating all sorts of things for you guys to do that, but you don't have to worry about that because that won't even be next week. That'll be the following week. Next week might be a little bit more low key since we're going to be gearing up for whatever this new phase 2 is going to be. So it'll probably be a little bit more low key, maybe a few more Google surveys, just checking in more about how you guys are feeling. This weather is really bumming me out. At least when it's nice out, you can get outside just for a little bit today. I don't like this weather, even though it is Friday. So that is a nice thing. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up because it's a Friday, you guys. You should just kind of relax. I'm going to put out another Google survey. Please, I'll send you a text saying, please fill it out. If you have any questions that I did not answer or any concerns moving forward, please let me know. I'm here. And I will see you guys soon. We'll probably do another Zoom conference on Monday. We'll check in probably Monday afternoon. I will post that Monday morning. I'm assuming most of you are sleeping in, but Monday morning I'll be posting, our schedule stuff. And I will see you guys then.